Hi, my name is Nada Werner, and I am the Director of Student Support Services at Hangzhou International School. I'm not in Hangzhou now. I am in North Carolina in the United States. 2020 was one of the most devastating and yet most miraculous years of my life, and I wanted to share it with you. The first part of it is like many of you and like many others. Early in the year, we didn't really know very much about COVID, or at that point, as we called it, coronavirus. My family and I were living in Abu Dhabi, and we were working and teaching and going to school at the American International School of Abu Dhabi. Just as there were beginning to be more COVID cases all over the world in early March, the country decided to move up spring break. So we moved up our spring break, and there was really no COVID. And so we were told that we could still go on spring break, but we chose to go to Turkey, where there was not a single case of COVID at that time. We spent a wonderful bucket list week in Istanbul, and then traveled to a gorgeous town on the Mediterranean called Kaş. Unfortunately, that week, while stunning and beautiful, was fraught with so much worry as airports were being closed all over the world. Eventually, we figured out that we would not be able to return to the UAE after changing our flight several times. And the U.S. State Department put out a level 4 travel warning and asked all the United States citizens in the world to come home if you are not in your country of residence or or in the United States. So we made the decision to come home to America. And in our case, North Carolina is our home state. At that point, we got on one of the last flights that actually landed in JFK before things got really, really crazy. And that was about March 20th of 2020. This is where it gets crazy. My dad and my mom live here in Erwin, North Carolina. And my sister and her family, her husband and her 2 kids, live in Ethiopia. My brother lives next door on the family farm. So just as at almost the exact same time as we were getting in, my sister's family also came in from Ethiopia. We quarantined in one place, my sister quarantined in another, and we were dying to see our parents. My dad had been diagnosed with a form of Parkinson's. It's called a Parkinsonism, and the name of it is multiple systems atrophy. What you don't know about my dad is that he was the most amazing, creative, strong-willed, loving go-getter ever. He was a fighter. He never stopped. He never stopped working. He never stopped doing things for us and doing things for other people. He is the man who everyone should have in their life, and he is the hero of so many people. And so every time we left to go back overseas, it was really hard for us to go because we knew that my dad would have progressed further into his illness as we left. But we FaceTimed all the time, and we always were home for Easter. I mean, not for Easter, sorry, for Christmas for 3 weeks or 2. And we were home for the whole summer. So, and my parents were wonderful, and they built this big house where my sister and I and our families could fit and stay with them. So we spent a lot of wonderful time together. So we came home in March. We quarantined. We couldn't wait to see my family. And As soon as those 2 weeks were over, we were back at my parents' house, and my dad was in heaven. I mean, my mom was too, don't get me wrong, but my dad was in heaven. He was a furniture maker and just a jack of all trades, and he couldn't do that anymore because his body was failing him, but he still had an amazing mind, and he had all these incredible ideas. And my boys, who are 17 and 15 now, they were 16 and 14 then, adored him. And my husband did as well. So they spent their days out in my daddy's workshop doing whatever my daddy told them to do. He was bossing them around and giving them all these crazy ideas. They actually built a Civil War cannon. And we actually shot the cannon, like a real live cannon, in our yard. Well, we have a big farm. But we lived here with them from early April. So we had a month and a half. And then one day in May, I went downstairs after teaching in the middle of the night. I was in Abu Dhabi. I was teaching in the middle of the night. And so I got up about 10 and I went downstairs and I said, "Where's Daddy?" And my mom said, "It's really weird. He's not up yet. He never sleeps this late." And we went in and he was not responsive. So we got him up. He wasn't with it, but he was alive. We got him up and called 911 and went through all of that trauma. And eventually they got him into the hospital and carried him in the ambulance to the hospital. And he was tested for COVID, which we knew he didn't have because he had no symptoms, and neither did the rest of us, and he didn't go anywhere to get COVID. And they wouldn't let any of us in the hospital with him. But thankfully, we knew some wonderful people who worked there, and they put a baby monitor on him, and they would help him FaceTime us. And so we kept up with him constantly. He had several infections in his body, including being septic, which is a blood infection that kills a lot of people. And all Daddy wanted to do was come home. That's all he cared about, was just coming home. Because he had his cannon and he wanted to fire that cannon, and he hadn't fired it yet, but they had built it. So Daddy came home on that Friday, and his COVID test still hadn't come back positive or negative, but they knew that at that point he didn't have COVID. And so that was Friday, and we picked him up from the hospital, and he was so happy. He was the happiest man I'd ever seen in my life. We went straight to McDonald's and got him a milkshake. And then we went to his favorite restaurant where you couldn't eat, but we sat in the car and we ate it outside like a picnic. We went home and I made him homemade peach ice cream, which was his very favorite, and a pound cake. And that's what he did that weekend. He ate all the wonderful food in the world that he loved. All the boys came over, my brother, my sons, our friends, and they shot that cannon. They shot that cannon. They made that cannon shoot, which was my dad's like #1 dream that he wanted to do. And that happened on the Sunday after Daddy came home from the hospital. And that Monday morning, my mom started yelling my name. And I came running downstairs, and my dad was gone. And it was the worst experience of my life. But it was also the most beautiful, because I got to sit there with him and hold his hand and hold his head while we waited for the ambulance to come. And it was the most amazing, most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced, because he had the best weekend of his life. He had all of his people there, my brother and his family, my sister and her family, me, all my kids, my mom, his sister-in-laws and brother-in-laws, and we were all there with him, and he shot his cannon, and he ate his peach ice cream for breakfast and supper, and he went to bed that night the happiest man on the planet. And so when he didn't wake up the next morning, it was a horrible, horrible, horrible time for all of us. But what a way to go. And so I guess my message is that 2020 was one of the worst years ever. But I'm so, so thankful that I wasn't able to get back in the UAE. And I'm so, so thankful that I had that time with my family. Thank you for listening.